Here's a man who's eaten fast food for lunch and dinner almost every day for the last 22 years. McDonald's, Burger King, whatever truck stop diner has a parking lot big enough for an 80-foot rig. No salads, no meal prep, no kitchen, just whatever's fast, hot, and available between load pickups. By every rule your doctor would give you, this man should be a walking medical emergency. And yet, talk to enough veteran drivers, and you'll meet guys who are pushing past 70, still out here, still healthy enough to pass their DOT physical every 2 years, still doing the job. The title of this video isn't really a fact. It's a question dressed up as a claim, because some truckers really do seem to defy what we think we know about fast food destroying a person's body. So which is it? Is there something about the physical reality of this job that protects certain drivers from what should otherwise wreck them? Or is this one of those stories where we only hear about the guy who made it to 70 and never hear about the much larger group who didn't? The honest answer involves real biology, real physical labor most people don't think about, and a number that's going to surprise you in a way that isn't good news for most of the industry. Let's get into the actual picture. The physical side nobody accounts for. Let's start with the part of the story that's genuinely true, because it matters. When people picture a truck driver eating fast food, they imagine someone sitting all day, every day, doing nothing but steering. That picture is incomplete. Long-haul driving does involve a lot of sitting. That part is real, and we'll get to the cost of it. But the job also involves physical labor that most office workers never experience. Securing loads, tarping flatbed freight in the wind, cranking dolly legs, hooking and unhooking trailers, climbing in and out of a cab that sits 5 feet off the ground dozens of times a day, manually loading or unloading freight, depending on the job. Some drivers are doing this constantly, others rarely. A hard day of manual physical labor can burn somewhere in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 calories. That's not driving. That's the loading, the securing, the physical maintenance of the job. For drivers whose work includes a heavy physical component, that activity creates real caloric headroom that a typical office worker eating the same fast food simply does not have. Here's the catch, and it's an important one. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data on average truck driver activity puts daily caloric burn for most OTR drivers at around 1,975 calories, which includes the driving, the walking around at stops, and the basic activity of the job, but is much lower than the physical labor estimate. The drivers burning 3,000 plus calories tend to be the ones doing flatbed, heavy haul, or manual freight work. The average dry van or reefer driver who drops and hooks preloaded trailers all day is much closer to a sedentary lifestyle than people assume. So the physical activity defense is real, but it only applies to a smaller slice of the driving population than the legend suggests. What the fast food actually does to the body over time. Now let's talk about what's actually happening nutritionally, because this is where the myth starts to crack. Fast food isn't dangerous because of a single meal. It's dangerous because of what consistently high sodium, high refined carbohydrate, low fiber eating does to your metabolic system over years. Chronically elevated blood sugar from refined carbs drives insulin resistance. High sodium intake drives blood pressure up. Low fiber intake disrupts gut bacteria in ways researchers are still working out the full implications of. None of this happens in a week. It happens over a decade, quietly, while a person feels completely fine, right up until a blood panel or a DOT physical reveals borderline diabetes or hypertension that's been building the entire time. And the data on truck drivers specifically is not subtle. A National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health survey found that 69% of long-haul truck drivers are obese, compared to roughly 31% of the general working population, more than double the rate. The same research found smoking rates twice as high as the general population as well. Other CDC-affiliated research puts the obesity figure even higher in some samples, up to 88% of drivers showing at least one major weight-related health risk factor. A separate NIOSH inspection of truck stops across the country found something telling about why this happens. 94% of truck stops surveyed lacked any access to healthcare facilities. 81% had no walking path. Half had no fresh fruit available at all. This isn't a story about individual willpower. It's a story about an entire physical environment engineered around convenience food and almost nothing else. If you want the real numbers behind trucking life, instead of the version that gets repeated without anyone checking it, subscribe. This channel exists to actually look at the data. Let's keep going. The live to 80 part. What's actually true? Here's where we need to be completely honest, because this is the part of the title that doesn't hold up the way people want it to. The data on truck driver life expectancy is genuinely concerning. Older industry research, including a frequently cited 2005 Global Insight study, put the average life expectancy for truck drivers at around 61 years, meaningfully below the general U.S. male average. More recent academic estimates suggest a gap of somewhere between 12 and 20 years below the national average life expectancy for long-haul drivers specifically, when accounting for the combined effects of diet, sedentary time, sleep disruption, and chronic stress. So statistically, truck drivers eat fast food every day and live to 80 is not what's happening to most drivers. It's survivorship bias wearing a baseball cap. We hear about the guy who made it to 75 and is still trucking because he's the exception worth talking about. We don't make videos about the much larger number of drivers who developed type 2 diabetes at 48 or had a cardiac event at 54, because there's no dramatic story there, just a quiet, common outcome that doesn't get discussed. That said, some drivers genuinely do age well on this lifestyle, and it's worth understanding why, because it's not random luck. Why some drivers beat the odds. The drivers who make it to 70 in good health tend to share a specific pattern, and it's not that fast food doesn't hurt them. It's that they've stacked enough countervailing habits to offset some of the damage. First, many of them are in the smaller group doing genuinely physical freight work. Flatbed, heavy haul, manual loading. The 3,000-plus calorie burn days create real metabolic headroom that protects against the worst effects of a high-calorie diet, even if the food quality itself is poor. Second, drivers who've been at this for decades often develop their own workarounds that never make it into the official health statistics. A cooler with real food bought at a grocery stop. A portable air fryer or Instant Pot wired into the truck's electrical system. Walking laps around the truck stop lot during a mandatory break instead of sitting the entire time. None of these show up in survey data about truck driver eating habits, but talk to long-term healthy drivers, and these habits show up again and again. Third, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, genetics and pre-existing metabolic health matter enormously here. Two people can eat an identical diet for 20 years and have wildly different outcomes based on insulin sensitivity, family history of cardiovascular disease, and individual metabolic efficiency. The drivers who beat the odds on a bad diet are often the same people who'd have beaten the odds on almost any diet, because their underlying biology was more resilient to begin with. None of this means fast food is fine. It means a small number of specific, mostly accidental factors can offset some of the risk for some people, while the majority of drivers, lacking those factors, end up in the statistics we covered in Chapter 3. The real lesson hiding inside the myth. Here's what I think is actually the most important point in this whole story. The truckers eat McDonald's and live to 80 idea isn't really about food. It's about how we tell stories about risk. We notice exceptions. We build narratives around the guy who smoked 2 packs a day and lived to 90, and we ignore the 100 guys who didn't. That instinct isn't unique to trucking. It's how humans process risk everywhere, from diet to driving to relationships. But the actual data on this profession tells a clear, consistent story. The combination of limited food access, sedentary hours, sleep disruption, and chronic stress creates a measurably worse health outcome for the majority of long-haul drivers compared to the general population. That's not a myth. That's the documented reality across multiple independent surveys spanning 2 decades. The physical labor defense is real for some. The metabolic resilience defense is real for some. But some is not most. And an industry built around an environment where 94% of truck stops have no healthcare access and half have no fresh fruit is not an industry where fast food is secretly fine. It's an industry where fast food is often the only realistic option. And the long-term cost of that gets paid quietly, 1 decade at a time. So, does the man who's eaten fast food for 22 years and is still healthy at 70 prove something special about truckers and junk food? Not really. He proves that genetics, physical job demands, and personal workarounds can offset risk for some people some of the time. What he doesn't prove, no matter how good his story sounds at the truck stop counter, is that the food itself stopped mattering. The real picture is less comforting and more useful. This is a profession where the deck is stacked against good health by the environment itself, not by individual failure. Understanding that is more valuable than repeating a myth about a guy who got lucky. That's the honest version. Let me know in the comments if you've seen this play out with anyone you know. And if you're not subscribed yet, this channel is exactly about finding the real story underneath the ones that get repeated without anyone checking.